Hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining us this beautiful afternoon to celebrate the life of our beloved Harry Kelton. Um, Harry, Harry and his wife Arlene co-founded this organization 42 years ago, and Harry was in the second act of his life. He was 54 years old, and I think it's really beautiful that I think a lot of people are making these great accomplishments early on in their life, in midlife, but this was the second half of their life, and it's going strong 42 years later. So beautiful thing. Harry and Arlene started Pelican this with one species, pelicans, and two volunteers in their household. And a toolshed quite a long time, 12 years. Today we have over 50 volunteers, 17 staff, um, and, volunteers and interns, 17 staff, and a wonderful board of directors with 3 charitable foundations on board, which is tremendous. Could our staff stand and please remain standing for a moment? Also, our board of directors and one of the board of directors, you also join in standing. And lastly, our volunteers, the former volunteers, Joe, that's you. And that's the interns, please. They're all here, carrying on this legacy because of that one pelican that touched their hearts and compelled them to take action 42 years ago. And as of today, we've treated 39,869 patients. I don't think they ever knew that one pelican they filed on Alpha would result in that. It really is a community organization that takes so much to make this happen. We're very grateful to the Department of Creation Places and all the donors that make this possible. Keep us up at 365 days a year, every day, except for hurricanes, since 1980. So we are racing sunset out here today, and so we're planning on concluding the program around 6 p.m. for Pelican release and something in central over here. It is informal, so please help yourself to the bathrooms or to get the sparkling or still water. So please feel free to do that. We're very grateful to the sophomore Symphony Orchestra and this beautiful trio for their wonderful music. And if you don't mind silencing your phones, just I keep mine always silenced. I'd like to bring up the executive director of the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council, who flew in from Seattle, and we're very grateful to have you here, Kai Williams.
Thank you. So I'm Kai. I'm with the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. We provide training and resources to wildlife rehabilitators all around the world. And Harry was a member of our organization for over 25 years, 9 of which were serving as a board member for the IWRC, including my first 4 years as executive director. So I got to know him pretty well. Harry was an engineer through and through, and that certainly colored his view of the world. I still remember, I think, the glee, and I think that is the right word, on his face when we got another engineer on the board. Harry and Melissa were pretty much the oldest and the youngest board members. There was a 50-year spread between them, and they got along brilliantly. They pretty much had their own secret shorthand of Harry was so happy to have somebody else speaking his language, another engineer. Harry's engineering mind was frequently a great help on the board as we delved into the why of the program. Never wanted to jump right into how are you going to do this and what's going on. It was first, you need to stop and you need to think of why. Go back to that very beginning. And it was really helpful to have that. I remember one time when I was the focus of the why. It was actually during my interview to be the executive director. And he was so, honestly, this speaks to what Chris said, he was so confused. He said, why do you want to leave your corporate job and work for a nonprofit? Well, I answered, I hate my job. I go into work every day thinking I hate my job. I'm miserable. I want to get back to doing something that matters, something that engages me. I'm happy to say that my answer satisfied him. He was well known on the board for being the devil's advocate, being a bit slow to embrace change, but as anyone who's worked with the board knows, that actually can be a very valuable skill set. Having board members that question, that think critically, that don't just pass things right through. And Harry was that. It was very helpful, but it did also bring him in for a bit of friendly ribbing. Board President Lynn Miller once suggested that we have a column on the blog or in the journal titled Curmudgeon's Corner, and that Harry be the author of it. Unfortunately, Harry was not amused. But my favorite memories of Harry really come from board retreats. Not from the meetings themselves, but from all the peripherals around, from talking about the state of the world in the evening, or seeing his curiosity on walks. This is where his full personality really came through. And there was one time when we were getting ready to take a picture of the board members and staff that were there and on some steps. Harry took a tumble off the steps. I was grabbing my phone out, getting ready to call 911. I mean, there was a light post about 10 feet away from where he was tumbling towards. But no need. Harry did this perfect tuck and roll. Did not. I mean, he kept his head tucked the entire time. And came up, didn't even need a hand up, no problem. And this was in his 80s. So that was Harry. And of course, there were icebreakers often at the retreats, including one year there was a foot spa that was announced to the board ahead of time as being the icebreaker. Well, came time that first morning for the icebreaker. Harry rolls up his trousers, takes off his socks to show us these beautifully pedicured and painted nails. Harry had gone and gotten a pedicure from a mani-pedi spot ahead of the board meeting to be ready for this. However, the next year, he showed up with a doctor's note in case that happened again to say, I now have to wear compression socks, and they are way too hard to take on and off more than once a day. So it was just wonderful spending time with Harry and working with him. He was an incredibly passionate and caring individual. His inquisitive mind was a boon to the IWRC board and just really improved the work we were able to do. Pelicans and all wildlife are really lucky to have had Harry in their corner. He leaves a glorious and lasting legacy.
Thanks, Ty. Up next, we have Ed Clark, the founder and president of the Wildlife Center of Virginia. It's one of the most respected wildlife hospitals in the country. Every year they have their annual Call to Wild conference with many of our team, and Harry is attending. Ed worked alongside Harry for decades and says he's one of the last of the old guard. So welcome, Ed Clark.
Yeah, how do I follow Kai? I mean, she's just so. But I have worked with Harry before Kai. I was president of the IWRC before Kai came on staff. And I had attended a few IWRC conferences as president of the Wildlife Center. Well, Wildlife Center of Virginia is not a wildlife rehabilitation center. They're actually a teaching hospital. So we get fourth-year veterinary students from every single vet school in the U.S. and Canada. We get veterinary students and graduates from 40 other countries around the world who come to our facility to study clinical wildlife medicine with our team. Now, what makes us really different from a lot of rehab centers is that our work is to use patients as a window on the environment. We want to know not only what's wrong with this animal, but why did it happen, and what do we need to do to make sure that it doesn't happen to others of this species, others of this population, and others of this ecosystem. And so I would often go to both the NWRA, the National Wildlife Rehabilitators Association, and then eventually got invited to IWRC, International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. And I was often a speaker on non-animal things, or at least human-animal things. I used to teach a lot on fundraising and organization management, strategic planning, and all that boring stuff that animal people don't want to do, which is why so many animal organizations often struggle to keep going. Harry was one of those ones who was absolutely unabashed in picking brains. But I had known Harry for nearly 3 decades, since the 1990s. And IWRC itself went through some ups and downs before Kai got there to bring stability. And in fact, in the late 90s, they had a mass walkout of the whole board. Now, they weren't mad at anybody else. They were just all mad at each other. And they finally said, we quit, leaving board president Marge Gibson by herself. And she was mad. So she grabs me at the conference and says, you've got to come on the board. I said, well, why did everybody quit? She says, I'll tell you after you get on the board. So I said, well, I'm going to come on for a 1-year term before I consider a full term. She says, okay, whatever. I said, now what are my duties going to be? She says, well, you have to fire the editor of our journal and you have to deal with Harry. Well, I got to fire the editor of the journal stuff. I don't have to fire many people, but I do have experience, and that was no problem. And I said, well, what do you mean, deal with Harry? She said, she'll find out. Well, I just want you to remember, this was in the days before caller ID. Now, Harry got my home telephone number. Now, Harry was, shall we say, single-minded. Would you agree with that? Purposeful. Her description of him as the engineer, engineers love straight lines, whether they go through something or they don't go around. Straight lines are an engineer's thing, and that was Harry's way. So Harry got my home phone number. And I will have to say that in my entire life, I have never hung up on another person so many times in my life as I did with Harry. Harry had a way of finding your last nerve and pinching it. So I learned to deal with Harry. And then, more importantly, I learned to listen to Harry. Now, Harry wasn't always right. He always thought he was right. He wasn't always right. And when you finally showed him that he was not right, he wanted to know why your idea worked as well as it did, and then he took it as his own. And then the next time it came up, it was, well, here's what I said we should do last time. And, I taught him that. So that's something that worked well. But Harry started Pelican Harbor in 1980. The Wildlife Center of Virginia started in 1982. So Pelican Harbor actually predates our organization by 2 years. And as I said, we're very different. My organization has got a staff of about 30 people and 3 veterinarians, but we only treat about 3,800 animals a year. And that's because our mission is not to treat broken animals. We teach people. But one of the things that I always think back on is Harry always wanted to know, tell me about your success. Don't tell me about your animals. Tell me about your organization. Tell me about your fundraising. Tell me about your banking. Talk to me about your accounting system. And he listened. And he wanted to know, and why are you charging this to that account? It seems like it ought to be this account. And, you ought to put all your salaries together and, put it all under one line item in your budget. It's like, no, don't do that. Because nobody wants to pay salaries. They want to take care of animals. Well, guess what? You can put all the money in the world in the bank, and without salaries and volunteers and people, animals don't get fed, and they don't get cared for. I can still see Harry. I knew that. And so finally, caller ID came out. And we could tell who was calling. So a lot of us got a lot of messages from Harry. Well, I've had to say goodbye to this is the hard part. People and animals are in love. Last week I had a 17-year-old. I need another shot. And you do have that at the refreshments, right? There's still water, regular water, and good Kentucky brown water. I had to say goodbye to a 17-year-old terrier that I had since I didn't even want it. I adopted him to give to a former girlfriend's mother. So they brought him to my office, and it took about 23 seconds for me to understand after the dog had climbed the bookcases, thrown everything off my desk, emptied the trash can. He was 10 months old, weighed about 14 pounds, that he was a little bit too much dog for this older lady. And I described that dog as stubborn, prickly, single-minded, determined, seldom cuddly, but always lovable. And last week I was telling somebody about Harry. And she says, he sounds a lot like your dog. So here I am. And the truth is that Harry could be frustrated. I'm sure Kai would never agree to that. He could be demanding. He could be single-minded. He would not take no for an answer. He would not take an answer that he felt incomplete. And God bless him for every bit of it. Because all of that stubbornness, all of that single-mindedness, all of that annoying persistence as he was chewing on your ankle, you'd tell Harry, we can't do it. It's impossible. And he'd look at you and say, hogwash, when are you going to get it done? And sooner or later, we would either have to come at him with overwhelming evidence and prove that another way was okay, or we just do it Harry's way, because that was the path of least resistance. But the truth is, Harry leaves behind Pelican Harbor, Seabird paradise. You think of all those tens of thousands of animals, you think of all of the people sitting here and all of the people who aren't sitting here whose lives were touched by Harry Kelton. And he has blessed us all, and he was my friend.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks for pouring in. Up next, we have one of our greatest champions for Pelican Harbor Seabird Station for over 30 years, who helped us build the building. It was at the original ribbon cutting with Harry and Darlene. Former board member, honorary lifetime board member, and clerk of the county court, Harvey Ruman.
There's one word I haven't heard, though, that you really need to hear. It's a name. Darlene. He was in a pair. They lived as a pair, they loved as a pair. They did all this as a pair. I can't really talk much too much right now, but I couldn't miss coming out here. Because in my mind, I remember a day some 32 or 3 years ago. I had just been elected county commissioner, and I heard about what was happening here. Just a couple of strangers, northerners that were living on a houseboat, that was somehow aware that birds were crossing the island or wrapped up in fishing gear that they got trapped in at the pier, that they were compelled biologically to go to Bird Island. So we just about crossed over Harry and Darlene's houseboat. And what most people do. First thing we do is complain about, what kind of mess that creates. Not Harry and Darlene. When they introduced me, they immediately saw that there might be some power to do something there. And it was really all of them, none of me, that moved this over to basically the beginning to the zoo to figure out what kind of appropriate reaction the county should have. This should not be a private, two-people enterprise. This should be a job of the public to take care of these creatures. And I'm going to close this by saying that when I think of Harry and Darlene, it's so unusual. Two people that not only believed and understood that they're a part of nature, but they live their lives based upon that premise. Something we all should do. Harry, we love you.
So I alluded to the fact that, that Harvey helped the county build this building for us in 1992, and this was under the Miami-Dade County Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces, and because of that, we've been afforded free rent, free utilities, a wonderful, beautiful park to release pelicans and treat pelicans for the last 32 years, and so I want to thank Miami-Dade County Parks Director Maria Nardi and welcome her to the stage.
Hello, Ivy. So good to see you. Yes. And hello, everyone. It's so good to see you all here. It's really befitting, I think, that we celebrate the life of Harry here in this park and marina where he and Darlene first launched this pioneering Seabird rescue and rehabilitation station. It really is something significant. I'd like to first recognize somebody in the audience who was an important part of that development, who you can very much credit with all of that, our former director, Jack Hardis, who's here with us today. Hearing all of you speak about Harry is really heartwarming for many reasons. One, because we're celebrating his life, and the other thing because we're recognizing an extraordinary contribution. And the third reason is because I see in the audience my team, and I think about all the rest of department employees in the department that have been influenced, have been touched in some way or another, mentored, and established this extraordinary ethic of help us sustain and inspire an ethic of preservation and wildlife conservation. On behalf of Miami County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava, who regrets not being able to be with us today, and Miami-Dade County Parks Department, I really want to extend our deepest condolences and once again celebrate this incredible life of Harry and the work of Darlene as well, two extraordinary community icons. As we all know, he was an incredible, passionate advocate with made significant impact to wildlife conservation. And globally as well, which is just extraordinary. As I mentioned, I think we can all truly believe and trust that his work will continue to impact generations to come. I have with me something, a proclamation that I would like to share with the family. So if the family could please join me, and if Jack, if you could please join me on stage as well for this. On behalf of Miami-Dade County, yes, if the family could please join me on stage. On behalf of Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava and the Board of County Commissioners, I would like to present the following proclamation. And I would also ask actually our parks team, where are you? Tommy, get up here. Tommy, both Tommies, Sherry, come on up, you guys. Miami-Dade County notes with profound sorrow the passing of Harry Kelton, one of this community's most beloved residents. Harry Kelton was a passionate wildlife advocate and founder of Pelican, Harbor Seabird Station, and an upstanding member of our community who made significant contributions that tremendously impacted our society. Harry Kelton was known for developing a special medical procedure called the cottonfish for pelicans, which he taught to veterinarians and wildlife rehabbers. This community mourns the passing and celebrates the life and will forever treasure the memory of Harry Kelton, who will be sorely missed by his family and all of those he befriended. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Daniela Levine Cava, Mayor of Dade County, Chairman Jose Pepe Diaz, and members of the Board of County Commission do hereby declare that Harry Kelton's lasting contribution will forever hold a special place in the lives of those whose path he crossed. So with that, let me present to you.
I expected to go at the end, so I wasn't super prepared, but Grandpa has always been in my life. I've known everybody who's ever talked about him has always been Harold, Harry, but to me, he's been known as the guy who shoved his hand down at Pelican's throat to retrieve my shoe at 4 years old. So that never, never fazed me, always being chased by pelicans for most of my childhood, and anything you can think of, surrounded by any kind of animals, that was my life with him. as I grew older, you know, he's always been there. He taught me how to drive, was my accomplice in my little car accidents. You know, he was just always there for me. He was my only grandparent who got to see me graduate from both high school and college. So it was a great honor just for him to see that. And I was able to visit him right before he passed away 2 months ago. And it was, you know, just the same as he's always been stubborn, always cracking jokes about every little thing, trying to tell me about everything going on in his life and just all his amazing stories that he always told me. I'm grateful to have him as a grandfather and to have the family that I had and to have everybody who appreciated and really loved him and to know that he really did have an impact on a lot of people. And I'm also thankful for my parents who gave me Darlene as my middle name so I can always remember her and keep Kelton as my last name forever and always. So I really appreciate everybody being here today for him and for just everything generally he's always done for everybody. So thank you so much.
That was beautiful, really beautiful. Tommy Sala, Marine Manager for Pelican Harbor Marina, one of Harry's favorite people. Tommy, come on and share some love.
Thank you. My name's Tommy Soleil. I'm the Marina Manager at Pelican Harbor Marina. I'm the County Park. So I'll tell you my favorite Harry story real quick. I started here in 2008. I was a Marina attendant. My very first day, on the very first morning, I was doing a dock check and walking around the Seabird station, changing garbage here. Just kind of soaking it in, taking it in, being in this new atmosphere, this new job, and watching this Pelican come from behind the Seabird station, walk into the parking lot. Just kind of marveling at it, you know, how incredible Pelicans are. And pretty soon, a car pulls up, a gentleman gets out, he greets the bird greets him, and then together they walk towards the back of the Seabird station. Yeah. The whole time I was just watching it, and I just marveled at it. In my head I thought this is going to be quite a place, and God has it been since I've been here. And little did I know that was the famous spread out of some of you knew. I had the privilege of seeing him the last time he visited the harbor. It might have been one of the last people actually. And we had a brief conversation that meant really a lot to me. I think I'll keep to myself. He really was an incredible person. I learned a lot from him. Just an incredible human being, and it meant a lot that we had that relationship.
Thank you, Tommy. Sherry Fisher, former Pelican Harbor Marine Manager, current Hall Over Marina Manager. She has a lot of history with Harry.
So I was here from 2004 until 2013, where I left and went to Hollander, where I am presently. And if I were to choose a word that described Harry, I would pick devoted. Harry was devoted to his wife Darlene and their family, and Harry was also devoted to a life of saving and nurturing injured seabirds. Harry was a humble man. Care less about the riches of the world. To him, his life was rich and fulfilling, taking care of the Pelicans. He was a kind man. I am grateful and honored to have known Harry. We spent countless hours walking the docks over the years, chatting about anything from the world and local news, old times, and of course the many challenges we faced on a daily basis. One of my challenges was to keep a happy balance between the seabirds and the boats, specifically the boat owners. One particular day, I got a call that there was an issue on the dock. I could hear someone yelling in the background, and I thought, oh boy, I better hurry up and get over there. So it seems a pelican had gotten himself caught up in one of the boat owner's lines, and Harry had jumped in his dinghy and went over and cut that line, cut the pelican loose. By the time I arrived, Harry was climbing back on the dock, a pelican in one arm and a half a rope in the other arm. The boat owner yelled at him, "You did this," as his boat was kind of hanging towards the rocks. Harry said, "That's right. I did that, and I'll do it again and again." And I had to kind of cover my face because I had a big smile, because the way he said it and the smile on his face was like, yeah, he will. He'll do that again. So needless to say, every time a boat owner left a rope in the marina, we would keep it aside just in case. And true to his word, this wonderful, kind, devoted man, Harry, saved pelicans again and again.
Beautiful, beautiful Sherry. Marilyn McGill. Marilyn has served on the board since just before I started, so I think 2012 or 2013. She volunteered every Sunday for forever, and we affectionately call her one of Thelma and Louise. She's Louise. But Marilyn's amazing and very dedicated and serves on the steering committee and the board, and we love you, and Marilyn McGill.
In 2006, my friend called and asked me to drive out to see the station with her. The gate was open, so we went inside. A few minutes later, a man came out and there was Harry. And he gave us this wonderful tour, answered all our questions, and of course we gave him permission to go back. 4 years later, I started volunteering at Pelican Harbor. During that time, I had the opportunity to work several events at the Fairchild area. He engaged all who passed by our table, and Harry always got donations from them. He knew how to work. In 2014, Harry invited me to join the board, and I will always be grateful to him for that opportunity. Whenever I see coffee, I think of Harry and smile.
Thank you, Marilyn. Jude. Jude is one of our favorite volunteers. She's named honored on Friday at the Association of Fundraising Professionals luncheon, and she had the pleasure of working and volunteering with Harry and Darlene back in the 90s. And she came back in the 2000s, 2010s. So Jude.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to say a couple of words. I started volunteering at Pelican Harbor in 1997. And I think I got rescued along with the birds by Harry and Darlene. Coming here, volunteering here, really changed my life. So I wanted just to honor Harry and Darlene and to say how grateful I am. So thank you, Harry, for being such a fierce protector of the birds. And thank you for your vision in creating this amazing place. And thank you, Harry and Darlene, for your friendship and for giving a lot of us who love animals a chance to do something to help.
So beautiful. And we hear that over and over again from our beloved volunteers about how being in Pelican Harbor actually helps heal them, us, working with animals is very healing. We love you. I don't know, is Marvin like some of the road? Marvin! Come on up. Marvin used to work, I believe, Miami-Dade College, And in 1986 or 7 or so, he'll correct me, he created with his students the very first sign for Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. It was really cool. The students were diverse. It was awesome. Marvin has been involved for the last several decades, and he's also a member of our Legacy Society. We're very grateful to you, Marvin, and thank you.
Yes, I know I look much younger than that, but it was back in the 80s. I was advisor to the Honor Society at Miami-Dade College, and we were always looking for wonderful community service projects. That's one piece of information over here. Second piece of information over here, I live about 2 blocks from Harvey Rubin, who I think has had to go. We live right over there, and we live on the water. I've been in the same house for 66 years, and we are constantly finding creatures in need of assistance, and many of them were birds. And for the longest time, we had nothing to do with them. We managed to take them somewhere, to have them help somehow. And then someone mentioned to me that we now had a Seabird station, and we could take our damaged friends over here, and they'd be looked after as well as possible. And that was certainly the case. So I started bringing our foundling birds over here, got to know Harry and Darlene. And so I suggested that my students might want to come over here and volunteer and help out, and so they did. And that was when there was a tool shed with 10 centerpiece letters from Neisner's, which used to be over there. None of you remember that. On the tool shed, it was pretty much right there. And so they had their little gold letters, and one of my students, who was very artistic, said, you know, they need a sign. And I said, you're right. And this student painted a beautiful black and white pelican about this high, and very nice calligraphy, Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. And we put it on that tool shed, and I swear the sign was almost as big as the tool shed, but it worked. The students kept on coming. I met my lovely and talented wife. She started volunteering at the Seabird Station. Her volunteering involved not working with the birds, which all the volunteers wanted to do, but her volunteering involved helping Darlene clean up the place, straighten up the office, do the clerical work. No one wanted to do that. Everybody wanted to pet pelicans. And I remember lots of their birds. I remember Oliver, who they claimed was a rescue bird, but I don't believe it. I think Oliver was a pet. They had a cormorant named Corky, who liked nothing better than to sit on your arm or shoulder. They claimed he was an educational bird. He was a pet. And they had some pelicans, too, I hear. They were also educational birds. But I didn't believe it, neither did the pelicans. It was a wonderful place. And it remains one today, largely because of Harry and, of course, Darlene. I have only one other thing to say, and that is this. If you like the work of the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station, if you honor the memory of Harry and Darlene and all of the birds that they took care of, the best thing you can do so is to remember the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station in your final planning, as my wife and I have done. It doesn't matter how old you are. You might be 25, you might be 140 like I am. It doesn't matter. Remember the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. That is the best way to make sure Harry and Darlene's wonderful work continues long after all of us here today are gone.
Thank you, Marvin. Lloyd Brown, the founder and executive director of Wildlife Rescue of Dade County. I've known Lloyd for a good 30 or so years, and he's known Harry since the beginning. And you got some stories about Laura Quinn too, I believe, and I hope you'll share them. So welcome, Lloyd Brown. Lloyd is the maverick. He's quite a maverick.
Well, I thought I had my thoughts prepared, so I started hearing everybody else talk, and I said, oh yeah, I got to talk about that, I got to talk about that. But it's really easy to look at the wonderful work done by the folks and the staff at Pelican Harbor and attribute all that to Harry. What some people don't realize is the other places where he had a lot of impacts. Harry was the mentor to my mentor. My mentor, Laura Quinn, learned the craft of wildlife rehabilitation from Harry. And so Harry not only was responsible for the many birds saved in Pelican Harbor, he can also be directly or indirectly related to the animals saved at the Florida Keys Wild Bird Center in Tavernier. That's where I got my start with Laura. And in my center, Wildlife Rescue of Dade County, down in the south end of Dade County. And Kelly Grinter at Marathon Wild Bird Rescue, she got her start there too. So all of us can trace our lines back to Harry. And a couple of us here, Guy and Ed, work with International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. I serve on the board of directors and as an instructor. And in the 1990s, when Ed was talking about when all the work quit, the president, Marge Gibson, appointed me as the regional director for South Florida and the Caribbean, and not director, regional representative, excuse me, for South Florida, for Florida, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. What she didn't tell me was that involved Harry. So, yeah, I made the mistake of actually walking up and introducing myself to him on an airplane. We were both going to Tucson, Arizona to the conference in 1998. And I'd seen him get on the plane, and so I asked the lady sitting next to him if she wouldn't mind trading seats with me. So I sat down next to Harry and said, yeah, Harry, I've been appointed as a representative for IWRC. Oh, man, that was a mistake. Because he rehearsed his speech all the way from Atlanta to Tucson. And when we got off the plane, he said, oh, you want to share right? No, I got it. Okay. But I also, I remember Darlene, Harry's wife, what a lovely woman she was. And I've heard a couple people talk about how the activity of wildlife rehabilitation has healed them as well. And me, I came out of the Army after a career in medicine. To be quite blunt about it, I was thrown out of the Army. I had one of those careers where you do things that damage your soul. So, actually, I was a homeless veteran when I got out of the Army, and I moved into Laura Quinn's house in the Florida Keys Wild Bird Center. It's where I met Chris. And I lived in her house on the beach and started working in this field. And I guess I had an aptitude for it, and next thing you know, not only were running a center, I'm being sent around the world to teach classes on how to do it. But yes, it did heal me more than all the VA's drugs and all of their therapies. The living in the Keys, taking care of animals right after while I was working with them. I was also working with dolphins. So yeah, this field of wildlife rehabilitation has not only helped a lot of the animals, but a lot of the people who do it. So thank you, Harry.
Bruce Warner. Bruce is, I'll give that big Bruce. This is Harry's nephew. Thanks for driving over from Fort Myers, the West Coast area.
I've known Harry probably 65, 68 years. And the project that he took on here required one hell of an engineer. A little bit of history on Harry. He went to work for Dairy Queen in the early 60s and helped develop the soft serve ice cream cone machine. He left there, went to work in Georgia, and had two jobs at that time, driving for two different engineering projects he was working on. He was one of the first persons in Georgia to ever fly a Mercedes in 1961, 190D Mercedes. They've got 40 miles a gallon. Harry was saving gas before it was built. He was always kind to me. He helped me as a child with the science project I was working on, and actually breadboarded transistors when they were new in the early 60s into a transmitter that would transmit your voice underneath. He just sat there and this, and this. Of course, they knew the 10-year-old didn't do this, so I didn't win the prize. I did enjoy my time with my uncle. He was dogged about this. It took an engineer to do it. He kept saying, I need an x-ray machine. And I said, why don't you buy one? He said, well, you gotta have this, that, and the other. He finally found one, bought a used x-ray machine. I did this. This is the first time anybody's done this. It does find out where the fish hooks were. Because the fish hooks were killing the birds. He developed many surgical practices wide use today. But he was a loving person, a caring person, stubborn as hell. But I love him. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Bruce. Yaritza Acosta. Yaritza is our wildlife rehabilitation manager. She's been with us for over 10 years, and she got to work closely with Harry for longer than anyone.
Yes, when I started, Harry was still active in the clinic with certain things. And I remember my first weeks here going on a rescue for a great blue heron. And even though I have 4 years of rehab experience, I've never worked with seabirds or water birds. And Harry went with me to show me how it's done. And I remember the bird was in someone's yard, it was fenced, they weren't at home, but they said we could get in there and get the bird. And I just watched this old man climb this fence, chase this great blue heron around and net it and put it in a cage. And I was just like, wow, this guy's pretty cool. I think I'm going to stay here a little while. And in the clinic, he showed us how to suture up pouch tears in pelicans. He showed us the cotton trick. He would climb on ladders to get injured pelicans on top of the pens. And it was always just like so scary because, you know, he's in his 80s and 90s and he'd just be like, give me more fish, I need to get this pelican. And we're just like, okay, whatever Harry needs. So I learned quite a bit from him. And I know that he changed a lot of lives and inspired a lot of people, including myself. And I'm glad to learn from him and still be here and see how Pelican Harbor has changed and grown over the years, the ups and downs. Early on, you know, seeing Harry disagree with certain things, but eventually come around to the changing of the times. And so I'm inspired by him to keep doing this work and to still be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Yaritza. Clarification. Yaritza has worked with Harry longer than anyone on our current team. Many, many more have worked longer, like Dr. Julia Zayas, Dr. McCoy, Joan Sage, etc. Maria Green. Is Maria Green here this evening? Okay, Lynn Hyde. There we go. Here comes Lynn. We will have a moment at the end for anyone else that wants to have a little open mic, just to share anything that you do. We just have about 3 more speakers, and then we'll move on to that. Hi, Lynn.
So, I am nobody. I never met Harry. I saw him once at the Miami Shores gathering, but I not met this man, but the Pelican Harbor place being here in my backyard, I live right back here. And every night, my husband and I have our wine outside, and all these beautiful pelicans fly across every night. And I've always loved animals, and I recently lost my father. And when someone you love dies, you get really close to what's important in life. And I'm turning this bend right now, and I want my life to be more and more for the animals. And when Chris wrote this letter, Who Wants to Speak, I felt inspired. And I just want to say to life that
anything we can do to keep these creatures going, alive, is the most worthy thing any human being on planet Earth can do right now. And so this for me is a way of saying to the universe, I want to go forward and I want to do everything I can, like this incredible man inspired so many people to do. And thank you for it being regional. I give to these animal organizations, but in my backyard I can help. So thank you for letting me speak and letting me get aligned with my purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Is Andrew Tabone with us? Andrew? Okay, Ann Wiley. Ann is a fierce environmental conservationist. She is amazing and been very involved and knows everything about birds, and we love and appreciate her very much.
It's been really wonderful hearing all these people speak, especially Harry's family. Thank you so much to his granddaughter and his nephew for being here. It means a lot to us for his family to be here, so thank you. I don't know where they are, but that was very poignant. And you did have a fantastic grandfather. I first moved to South Florida in September of '84, and I was very fortunate to meet a handsome Italian guy who started dating, and he was a native, and he wrote a list of all the fun things to do in Florida. I didn't know Florida at all. You know, tube down the Itchy River, kayak, Juniper Springs, learn how to scuba dive, and visit Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. That was on his list. So I came here for the first time in the late fall of 1984. And what I found, I don't even really know how he knew about the place, but what I found was a houseboat, kind of an old houseboat, but certainly sufficient. And in the parking lot in front of the houseboat were about 4 or 5 of those blue kiddie pools. And there was a couple on the houseboat, and that was Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. Those pools, and a tiny little group of people. So it was so nice to see Harvey Rubin. That took me right back to those days. And you mentioned Dr. McCoy and Kate and John Sage. Kate and John Sage were just powerhouses. They were the team. They were behind Darlene and Harry. So I think some of us got to know Darlene and Harry very professionally and had, that Harry was maybe a little much of a curmudgeon. Others of us got to know him through a heart connection. And so I didn't even know he was a curmudgeon. Can you imagine? All those years I had. I had a wonderful relationship with Darlene. She was an unbelievably wonderful lady. That's your middle name? That's lovely. We had a lot of conversation when her son David was ill. They were pursuing different paths, and I had come from a holistic background, and so we discussed that a lot. And then I got to know the different directors. So Wendy Fox, of course, I think she started first as a volunteer, and when I first met her son, he was about 7, little Brian. And Darlene would help him with his homework on this new thing called a computer. So we would walk through the entrance of Pelican Harbor Seabird Station and back to the back room, and there little Brian would be working. So it was a window of time for this place. It was very much in the beginning, and I became a volunteer, and I was a proposer, right? Some of you have done that, right? It was the proposer, which I loved. Interestingly, when Wendy Fox passed away, I was walking on the beach doing sea turtle conservation work. My boss called and told me she had passed. And when Harry passed away, I was working on the beach with Elise Turns, and you called and told me, Chris, so thank you. We're very, very fortunate we had these two very insightful, passionate, amazingly dedicated people. I'm very happy I knew them as a team. They had a tremendous love for one another. But truly, the torch has passed. And I know we're here to honor Harry and Darlene and how the beginning began. But now, and for the past many years and going into the future, there's an astonishing team here. And everybody, when you talk about Pelican Harbor Seabird Station, everybody says they're so lucky to have Christopher. So to Harry and to the wonderful people who are working here, thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have an amazing team of staff and board and volunteers, and we're so grateful. So we do have a little time for open mic. So if anyone wants to come up and say a few words, you're welcome. You can just move on up, and if not, I will roll on to the finish line. Here comes Jack Hardis, former Parks Director. You can catch him, I think you can still catch him at the Love In Festival at Girls Park West. I think he has a nice band.
Hi, everybody. I think what was just said, the evolution, being able to watch the fruits of the labor that Harry and Darlene put into this operation is just amazing. I was the park manager at Hallover, and Pelican Harbor was part of my responsibility in 1983. And in '83, I came down here and I saw exactly what was just described. There was a couple of little blue kiddie pools, a bunch of chain link fence that had no rhyme or reason to it, that was sort of tried to be arranged into some kind of pens of some sort, and a beat up green hose that was run for water from God knows where. And I remember that was the first thing I did when I met Harry was, I looked at it and I said, my God, I said, can I get you a hose? And he says, well, that would be wonderful. And I went back to my storeroom at Hallover and I brought him about a couple 100-foot of green, good, solid, county issue heavy duty hose. And I made a friend for life. I mean, and that was always the most endearing thing for me about Harry, was that it didn't matter how smart you were or how great we were as managers, and we were, at that time this whole marina was being designed, and we were going to be building it, and it was going to become a much more than what it was. Those of you that remember in those early 80s what it was like here with the liveaboards and prostitution and the other kinds of crazy stuff that wandered in off the roadway there, and this place was a mess. It was a real zoo. And Harry and his wife, they took that all in stride. They would just shrug it off. I mean, we had the boat club here. The boat club, I remember when I first got here, I walked up to introduce myself, and I saw this little sign on the door, right on the door. And it said something, no colors allowed. This was in 1983. And so that was still on something on a county property. And I said to Harry, I said, who are these people? And he didn't care. He was about the Pelicans. And one of the things that everybody talked about today too was, his stubbornness or his obstinance. Harry was a fighter, and nobody witnessed firsthand what those fights were like, except, unless you were at Hallover Park when you watched Harry storm onto that fishing pier, when he had to come get one of his containers when they had caught one of the birds, or when they couldn't catch a bird because that had been hooked with those nasty little gold filter rigs, the little hooks, the tiny hooks. And so he and I talked about that, and the pier owner was adamant. There was a guy named Richie who managed the pier at the time. And I would get a call from Richie's staff, said, Jack, you better get over here right away. Harry's here, and Richie's threatening to kill him. And, he would get there. And Richie was a guy that probably, was packing. He God only knows what he did. Harry wouldn't back down for crap. I mean, he was in his face, and here's Harry, who was already, I guess he was, in his mid-50s at that point in time. But he would not back down whatsoever. It was all about every bird that he pulled out of here that would float up, and I would watch him in the evening when I would come over, and he would say, inevitably, you're going to see a bird that's going to be injured, it will be floating here, and he would net it, he would pull it out of the water, and take it to one of the little blue pens. we were treated. And I am a better man for that, because when I started with this department, I was a marina manager, and I knew boats, and that was my life. I was about the water, but I was not about wildlife. I was a good soldier. I worked for the Parks Department. The Parks Department was on a building spree. It was building marinas, golf courses, and parks all over the place. The Decade of Progress bond issue had just was being unrolled, and we had a lot of money, and we were doing all of that. But we left that behind, and Harvey Rubin brought that, and Harry brought that to Bill Bird's attention and said, that has to become a part of this, and it has to become a part of the design of this marina. And that's how, I think we did that first, and as the money was developed, the operation was put out on the peninsula there. But I am a better man for knowing Harry. We all are better people for knowing Harry. And I'm so glad everybody remembered Darlene, because Darlene was definitely the tact and finesse in that team. And she always kept a really good eye on everything we did, because she was up and working for the CEO of Channel 7, or whatever that tower was that was right over there. And God knows if there was anything that ever crossed the line when we were building the marina, we knew those cameras would be out there in a heartbeat. She kept us honest, but she did it in such a nice way. That, she was so lovely, what a lovely person. So anyway, it was a pleasure to know them. We're all better as having known them. And thank you. Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Thank you, Jack. And just double checking, we have the Pelican release as well, relatively close by. Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. I live in Miami Beach my name is Geraldine, sorry. Thank you. I'm glad to be here in this group. Because I think we're sharing the same thing. I know there are many biologists here. My sister was a biologist, and I lived in Peru near to Marshland at 10 minutes walk. I'm an artist in a way, and I used to go out there. So in April, I could see the birds migrating, and large amount of birds. And that's the only source of water, I believe, the sweet water that they stop. They go from there to the south of Chile or Antarctica. I don't know how far they go. I used to, I'm working and doing some art here for environment in Miami Beach, and I'm very into making more art to help with purposes like this. I brought 2 squirrels once here, and I was so glad that they were safe and care for people like you. So this is kind of this is a small place, this setting, Seabird station. I wish the whole beach is preserved as adequately, as it should be. I live here, and every time I see the trash in the ocean, I guess we share the same feeling. It's sad. And if this small group of people would be larger, I believe we can make the difference. So that's why I'm sharing something with you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to share a few words? Okay. I just had a few closing remarks before we move on. So Harry, like Aritha said, Harry was very involved. He was sharp as a tack, very clever, very physically, very strong. So he served on the board until December of 2019, where he was the secretary of the board of directors. He kept all of our records of history. He was very active in the finance committee, where he attended every meeting. He pretty much led every finance meeting. So very, very involved. Harry and I didn't always agree on things, as this happens with everyone that you love. But we did have a deep respect for each other, and that meant a lot. He was very supportive of our natives only policy in 2017. We switched from thinking everything to focusing our different resources on native species, so that was very good. In the last interview with the Biscayne Times, he said, I think Pelican Harbor Seabird Station is in good leadership and going in the right direction, and that was some nice validation coming from Papa Pelican. So He was scheduled to move to Zebulon, North Carolina, to be with his son John up there on May 2nd, 2017. But we had nominated him, thank you, Charlene, to the foreign board the next day. Now, not being one for pageantry, Harry was not really up for delaying his departure a day, but he did it. And on that next day, on May the 3rd, 2017, Harry Kelton was awarded the Outstanding Board Leader Award at the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce's annual Novo Awards Luncheon. And this was such a beautiful tribute on his actual 91st birthday. So very, very beautiful. And we're curious, it was one day away from his actual departure. On Facebook, if you look, Harry said he was 99 years old. He almost made it. He's 96. So, once we were back here at Pelican Harbor Seabird Station, he basically got in his RAV4 and drove off into the sunset. And he made the 12-hour drive at the age of 91 to Zebulon, North Carolina in 2 days. And he stopped in Jacksonville or something, obviously. That's a lot, you know? So, yeah. Also, Dr. Jim McCoy and Dr. Zayas. Dr. Jim couldn't be here because he's in South Carolina. And Dr. Zeiss back here, who were the veterans for many, many years. They were our two primary veterinarians working with Harry and Darlene in the community for all those years. And so just very grateful for them. They're a really big part of the history of Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. John Sage, as in alluded reference, was a very close friend of Harry as well. And John couldn't be here, and he's very sad. Like we almost moved to Dave because he couldn't be here. He's in California. But John actually helped Harry deliver his last houseboat from the West Coast to Miami through the Caloosahatchee, Okeechobee, and St. Lucie. And he has a beautiful tribute in the digital tribute online, so please, we'll email that to you. Please check it out. But one thing that really stood out for me was talked about how Harry being an engineer, his silent enthusiasm, his silent excitement as he passed through those blocks some Lego. And I just really love that. And John just has such high regard for Harry, kind of like, family member. John and Kate actually sponsored the fish ride for 26 years. I remember there was one year where they didn't give Harry a cab, and it was like $23,000, And so he's like, Harry, you got to put Hilbert on that. But anyway, we love you, John Sage, and please be distributed online. His great nephew, I don't know his name, he got a lot of emails from folks somewhere in the middle of the United States. He said, I didn't know Harry, but he was my great uncle. But I could tell that he was a no-nonsense kind of guy, but he had a big heart. And that was absolutely true. Absolutely true. Bob, this one I might give some help to the family, but Bob Kelton, your father, Bob couldn't be here, but Bob told me a story. We tried to piece it together. So if you think about it, Harry is born in the Roaring 20s. In 1926, this little baby boy was born, right? And Bob told me a story that in the mid-30s, Harry's dad moved down here, and I believe he was working on the dredging of Hollover Inlet. It was Hollover or Government. But basically, his dad was working on that. So Harry's like a young man. He's like 12 or whatever. But Harry was down canoeing, paddling the Miami River, catching snakes, and he was selling them to the indigenous folks at the time. And they would make them in fashion them into wallets and stuff. But he also had a black racer under his culvert where they lived that he would catch and scare girls with. But I love snakes, and Harry loves snakes. Harry loved nature. And Harry, a lot of people know that Harry moved here in the 70s when he was towards the end of his life. But he actually lived here in the 1930s when the Miami River had the Class 3 rapids, it had the crystal clear springs, and Biscayne Bay was much different than it is now, our beautiful bay, even more beautiful. But yeah, very, very cool stuff. Also, Harry, when we started treating mammals, we were living treating mammals, because we didn't always treat mammals. Harry said, oh no, he said, be careful. He said, you don't call this Possum Harbor. And he's like, if you're Possum Harbor, the county might think we should be better out west than they want here. We get too many possums. And we do treat a lot of possums, and they are amazing. They're lovely. One memory I have of Harry is one day we're taking the founder of a foundation out on the boat to Bird Key, and Tide was super low. And if you've seen the the ladders at the ramp at here, they're very steep, basically vertical. And so this 90-year-old man, it was literally 8 feet down, super low tide. He basically went down this ladder and with great agility and got in the boat no problem. And as a director for several years and a boater, I spring her up and I'm here at the helm. Harry kind of does this thing with his hand and scooches me out of the way, and he takes the helm. And he piloted that boat like the expert's old salt that he is. And after he went around, I hadn't seen him ride the boat in 3 years. After he went around Bird Key, he knew just where to trim the engine. There's some rocks. I think there's a little wreck. There's various things. He knew just where to trim the engine, just where to snug in tight, where to get out wide, and it was beautiful. And I was very impressed. Like many of you, I have some memories of Harry that I'll keep to myself. But after the program, if any of you are curious about who Harry voted for at the 2016 election, see me after the program. You might be surprised. And then Burger King. So Harry used to pop in. Basically, we would meet pretty frequently at Burger King. Money shows, booth number 2. He left the booths for his junior cheeseburger fix. And he would bring this 1 to 2 page list of worries and ideas and concerns that kept him up at night. And I guess, I understand this is his baby. He's passing the torch, and he wanted me to also be kept up at night. And so it worked. His list did work. I too became a worrier. I used to joke that Harry could make a career out of being a professional worrier. And in the end, he did sign a lot of his emails to the board, the worry board. So yeah. Harry loved Burger King. I don't know if he was as much for loyalty to his former employer when he used to develop, as an engineer, he actually built the fryers for them, or if it was much the taste and the value of a junior cheeseburger. But tonight in our reception, we want to invite all of you to indulge in a BK junior cheeseburger in honor of Harry. We do have other food if you're not up for cheeseburgers, and also we have hamburgers and impossible burgers for our kosher and vegan friends. The last thing Harry said to me before leaving was, take care of the Pelicans. It wasn't a hug, it wasn't I love you, and I'm a very touchy-feely person. And that was it. And we're doing that every day. Our teams, we're doing that every day and trying our best to uphold their legacy, and we're so grateful. Our favorite Pelican is going home to be with Darlene. Darlene passed on December 23rd, 2003, so about 19 years ago. So he's up there with her now, and we are closing now. I do want to say 2 last things. This all started with 1 pelican and 1 species, and the county created this beautiful building and the pens for 1 species. Today we treat 125 species, and so we purchased 2.6 acres down the road, and so we're moving over there in the next year, and basically 8,000 square foot facility. It'll have an education center, a manatee viewing location, manatees birth and give calves calf and birth there, mate. And also it's the Kessa Indian Archaeological Preserve with artifacts from 750 to 950 AD. It'll be a nature park with every day, 9 to 5. We also have 330 feet of living shoreline with pond apple groves and 9 feet of elevation over the river. So very excited about that. We will miss this beautiful land, this water, this park. We will always be partners and friends with Miami County Parks. We will do many of our Pelican releases here. And I think by being there, by promoting the releases here, we'll even get more people to celebrate those releases. And then we were, Commissioner Salahina couldn't be here tonight. She's about to turn out of office. Like Harvey, she's been one of our greatest champions for decades, many decade years. And for 2 decades, we had a Pelican party with the Darling Kelton Heart and Soul Award. And so tonight, we're going to present Commissioner Heyman with the Harry and Darling Kelton Pelican Champion Award. And so we will give that to her at her retirement party, but that'll be a reward that we do every year moving forward to honor both of them. And lastly, Harry and Darlene were all about pelicans. For the first 20 years, it was pretty much pelicans only. And so we wanted to create an opportunity for people to give. It would really be directly, specifically to pelicans, because we support 125 species now. And so we did create the Harry and Darley Kelton Pelican Fund. So anyone wants to make a contribution, it will go specifically as earmarked for unrestricted funds to the pelicans, and we're going to have that forever as an option on our website. And we're very grateful to Papa Pelican, our favorite pelican, for all that he did for us. Thank you so much for being here. I want to, because early, this was, you get to visit the video over there. I should bring up Chloe Chills, our assistant director, to read the poem before the Pelican release. And Chloe, before you do the poem, where is the Pelican? It's right up here. Okay. Well, we'll work on it. We'll probably right up here. And we will probably ask you if you want to get out of your seats and kind of form a semicircle around it, kind of better viewing. Just don't be in front of the Pelican, in front of the area. All right, Chloe.
Do not weep for me, for I have lived. I have joined my hand with my fellows' hands to leave the planet better than I found it. Do not weep for me, for I have loved and have been loved by my family, by those I loved who loved me back, for I never knew a stranger, only friends. Do not weep for me when you feel the ocean spray upon your face. I am there. When your heart beats faster at the pelican's flying grace, I am there. When you reach out to touch another's heart, as now I am one with the universe, I am there. Do not weep for me, I am not gone.
We fashioned that poem from Highway to Heaven in the 80s. It was about dolphins. We've been using it for years for this, but we just love that poem. So, granddaughters, we're going to have you over here for the Pelican release. And I think you're right, so let's do it over here in the sand in this area, and if you don't mind, we'll kind of form a line on both sides or kind of a semicircle around it. And listen, when we do Pelican releases, three things happen. Sometimes nothing happens, and that's where you get to be patient and breathe. Your box breathing. Sometimes they shoot out there super fast and fly into the skies, and other times they waddle out, hang out a while, and just sit in the rocks. So we'll see what this Pelican wants to do today. Thank you so much for joining us.
guys. How's my little birds this morning? Step aside.
Harry Kelton is the birdman of Miami. He used to be a mechanical engineer, making broilers for burger joints. Now he's retired and looks after injured pelicans. Hundreds of them.
Welcome to the funny farm. Ooh. It gets physical. No, not you. Not you. Get lots of good practice being a quarterback here. Float one gently over the head and... No.
Let's go back there. Oh, you fellows are nice.
Darlene works alongside her husband, Harry. Together they set up the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station 19 years ago. They say it's a hobby that's grown out of control.
We found that injured pelicans would be swimming down the bay at sunset. So we started dipping them out of the water with a dip net. And pretty soon we came to where we had to keep a pelican overnight. So we wrapped some fence wire around 4 posts of an old shed down here in the marina and kept the first pelican overnight, and from there on it just grew.
Guard that bucket. Yeah. Toss them a few fish.
Today they have 6 large pens and rescue about 250 birds a year. Mostly brown pelicans, officially a threatened species. Some are permanent residents, too disabled to fend for themselves. But most spend a couple of weeks receiving treatment and then return to the wild, to the urban waters of Miami.